Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Wandering Road podcast. I'm your host, Chris, alongside my co host, Dean. Co hosting with us as well today is my good friend, Mr. JJ, the host of the Southern Demonology podcast.
Woo.
And welcome back, JJ.
Thank you.
Welcoming back to the show for a third time is psychic medium Alex Gaska. Welcome back to the show, Alex.
Thanks for having me, guys.
I haven't talked to Alex in a while on a show. I know you do paranormal investigations. You're a psychic medium. You do readings for people. Interesting, cool stuff that we like to talk about and that we're interested in. So I figured we'd just have you back on for a part 3. So again, we're glad to have you back on. But for the listeners, before we started recording, Alex shared with us that she is currently staying in her parents' haunted home. And later, she is going to be doing a live investigation of said home. But one thing she also shared with us was that there was a failed exorcism in the home. So, Alex, you mind going into that a little bit?
Yes, there's some things I can't talk about too much, just so I don't spike activity for my brother and my mom when they get back from their trip. But basically, we had moved here when I was about 4 or 5 when my abilities first started. And I recognized something. I've always had a really strong discernment. So when I walked in, I always noticed that there was something negative here. The first entity I noticed was in the basement. It was like a shadowy figure, but you could make out a hat, and it had a whip too. And it would like whip the ground very intimidatingly, and I was like, okay, he's not nice. And then I would come into the living room, and there was a man in the rocking chair with like his leg up and everything. And those were the first 2 I noticed. And I told my parents, I don't really like the home, but I'm like 5 years old. What's anybody going to listen to with a 5-year-old? So it just kind of progressed as I got older pretty heavily. It went from infestation pretty quickly onto oppression, and very quickly. I mean, like to the point where as the years went, I would peak and fade. And a lot of times I'd like wake up in the middle of the night. There'd be like a big massless black shape on my ceiling. And that would either get bigger or smaller. It would move around. It would swirl around. I would always like see shadow figures surrounding my bed. I would have things grab me, talk to me in different languages. And I would always tell my parents there's something very bad in this home, but nobody else would experience it. Got to the point, I'm terrified of bugs. So they were using psychological warfare at this point. And I would see like swarms of bugs coming over me when I went to go to bed. And my parents would come in, they'd turn the lights on, the lights would go on, nothing would be there. And it progressed into my teenage years, so they took me to get psychologically evaluated. Not once, not twice, not 3 times, multiple times, to where nothing came of it at all. And the oppression got to the second stage of oppression, to where like people aren't really like excluded at that point. So then other people were getting attacked. My friends would come in. One of them has gotten choked before. Some of them have witnessed the hair dryer start on its own accord, the coffee maker start. We've come home to where we thought somebody broke in. Nobody had broken in, but the stove was on, the sink was running on its own. People were scared to be alone in this home. Our friends didn't want to come over anymore. Obviously, it got to a point where there was just multiple things that would happen, and my brother started to date somebody at the time, where she came over. She was waiting for my brother to get out of work. We were hanging out. She had her phone plugged in his room. My phone was in my room. I start getting messages from her phone, and when I looked up what the messages were saying, it was like in some kind of Latin. And then I start getting these gifts from her phone. I keep telling her, I'm like, your phone's texting me right now. And these gifts that popped up on my phone, there was one that said, "You're tacky and I hate you." The next one was from Aladdin, the genie coming out of the bottle, which if you study demonology, I'm sure JJ knows that could signify a jinn, possibly. So it was just, there was a lot of things that started to happen within just that night of the messages coming onto my phone. The girl starts to feel like stabbing in her side, and she had marks on her side. So I started trying to cleanse the home, because I had already started to study demonology. I had never done extraction. I had never done anything major up until this point at all. I'm trying to cleanse. I'm trying to start to rid whatever is out of the home. My stick of sage literally caught fire. Then it's smoky to the point where we're coughing. And we ended up having to contact, her mom was also a psychic medium that got me in touch with my first mentor that started to train me, who's also in the field. She does a good job. Her name's Christy London, actually. And she got me in contact with an exorcist, which I had to get my family to meet up with him outside of the home, plan for an exorcism. It was a whole big thing. Um, and within that time frame, I was just waiting for the man to show up. Within that week, the chandelier was swaying above people's heads on its own accord. The TV was going out. The animals were acting weird. If you started to think about anything on your own, you would like feel something come over. It was like it got bad. Last night we actually went to a hotel and met back here in the morning with The Exorcist. And the reason why it failed at the time, both my parents had an extreme addiction to alcohol. Extreme addiction. I mean, have gone in and out of rehab. People don't understand exorcism. You could have the best exorcist, it doesn't matter. But if the people are not willing to meet the exorcist halfway to keep that energy at bay afterwards, it's not going to work. So, unfortunately, it's very common for entities to come back a few days after. And that's just what happened after the exorcism. Nobody here had not one, they didn't know what changes they had to make. They didn't know that an entity can come through either law of attraction or law of invitation or both. And in this case, it was both because the area is very haunted. The land has been written about multiple times. Books by Mason Winfield, who is an author and historian. He's written a lot about the history of the land. And then, you take history of the land mixed with people that are struggling with addiction. There was a lot of animosity, a lot of violence, and it just kind of mixed for the perfect storm. So then since then, people have been found contorted. There's a lot of things that have happened here, actually. Shadow figures, feeling touched, you name it, really. Since my father's passing, because he was the one with the main addiction, it has calmed down. There's nothing really drawing anything here as much. So for the investigation tonight, it'll be a little bit lighter. I'm not trying to, pick at anything for my mom and my brother to come back to. But, of course, that actually ended up propelling me to go further into learning exorcism extraction and going, to do the shamanism that we had saw paranormal ended up going to do back then. We went to get our rites and initiations done to help deal with situations like that because it propelled me to want to give people answers. And we were left with no answers, so I ended up doing my own digging, and now here we are.
Do you think that this is, I mean, yes, it definitely from the description sounds like a horrible infernal infestation, but do you think it's also a generational curse or the two have combined or
Yes, I do. Yes.
it sounds like that.
Yes, those I've worked to break on my own, unfortunately, going forward. But yes, that's exactly what was going on, especially with my father's addiction and because the thing is, trauma and unhealed sources and things like that, that can just leave you open for demonic. So, and then when I did ancestry, really, really deep back into my father's line, there is some Arabian or Middle Eastern. So then I'm like, oh, maybe the jinn, maybe this makes sense. And there's been some confirmation. Mind you, there's multiple entities that were here. There was a portal issue here at one point in time as well. So there's a lot of different layers here. There's historical figures. There's portals, there's elementals, there's a lot of different things going on here. Recently finally dug up the deed to this place and found that a couple names match on another deed to another residential case. I'm trying to think if he was a senator or somebody in the area in the 1800s. So his name is on the deed here and a residential case that I've taken 35 minutes away, and that case actually turned into a haunted location.
I'm not questioning you by any stretch of the word, but with
Mm-hmm.
the severity of everything that you just described, is it
Yes.
wise to do an investigation?
I've investigated here before, yeah. Like I said, I've done a lot of training with the demonology I've studied for about 13 years, the extraction and exorcism I've done training with. And so when it comes to doing anything investigating with entities, I'm not here to necessarily provoke. It's kind of one of those things when if you feel something darker, you got to know when to walk away. And my psychic abilities kind of help me with that as well. So it's kind of like how I was saying, we're not going to really be diving into anything deep, more looking into the history and stuff like that. I'm not really trying to, stir anything up for my mom or my brother by any means. But I have investigated there in recent years. That was actually posted on Saw Paranormal. And yeah, we were getting some disturbing things here and there. And I would just tell Shane, I'd be like, okay, time to walk away. We're going to go do this. And everything was totally fine. So
Gotcha.
yeah, it's just kind of that balance. It's that gotta, not play with fire.
Yeah, I was just getting worried for your safety. That's the only reason I asked that. So
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, no. And because my dog is here as well tonight, so there's nothing I would do to ever. Children and animals are more susceptible, so there's nothing I would do to jeopardize.
When you do an investigation and you say like your psychic abilities kind of help you determine like, okay, this is evil, this is bad. Have you ever get like a quick glimpse into the future, but it's like precognition?
Like
Do your ability, yeah, premonition. Do you ever get those like while you're at a location or before you go to a location?
Yeah, I mean, I'll get signs or I will get, depending. I've noticed I do get all of the clear abilities, but depending on what spirit or how I'm tapping in will be what one I'm kind of using. And so like I'll get like clairvoyant image, like premonitions. One example, on our way to the Conjuring house, I kept seeing, and most people would think nothing of this, but I kept seeing roadkill, and specifically 4, and there was 4 investigators on the way there, and I was like, oh, psychic attack, cool, tight, we're all gonna get attacked tonight, great. And everyone's like, what, you're crazy. No, each one of us had an experience of being psychically attacked that night at the Conjuring house, so it was right on par.
If you can recall back to that investigation, what specifically happened to you at the Conjuring house that was like, oh shit, you put 2 and 2 together?
I knew I was going to be the first one because I was the one that everyone leaned on. I'm the one, like, if people are scared at an investigation, they're like, we'll bring Alex and then we'll be fine. So I knew that I was going to get targeted first. And I was kind of like mentally preparing for that. So I walked in and I instantly did not feel good. I got dizzy. I got nauseous. The energy there was kind of overwhelming. And this is back in 2021. So Jen and Corey owned it. I did not go during the Jacqueline Nunez era. But so Jen and Corey were doing a great job explaining everything. Well, this is just during the walkthrough. Shane and my friend Becca had to catch me because I physically fainted trying to go up the stairs because the energy was too much. That doesn't happen often. That like rarely happens to me when I go to locations, and not much like shakes me up either. So that was one sign where nauseous and dizzy. I was like, oh yeah, this is nothing great, nothing good. I'm sure there's all kinds of spirits there, but I was definitely getting that energy of the negativity. Then at one point, I'm trying to do a live, like as if, I'm like this, I can see myself in the camera. It's still daylight out. I'm walking by, I want to say I'm in the seance room, and, I'm walking by the window. So obviously light is coming through the window, and you can see that. We don't even need the lights on in the house yet. I'm right next to the window, and all of a sudden I can physically see it and see it in the camera. This shadowy, smoky thing came over my head, and I could see it, and I was like, and I just sat for a second, and I was observing, and then I started to not be able to see my face at all. So I immediately said, no, you don't have permission. Get off me, and then, it went away, but I got extremely nauseous. And I was like, I need to step outside for a minute. And you could tell that I didn't feel good because everyone started looking at me. They're like, are you okay? Are you okay? Because I felt like I was going to vomit, to be honest. So all night it was kind of like that. And then at one point I like walked into a different room. And I was like, oh, I feel a lot better all of a sudden. And Shane was right behind me. And as he followed me, he's like, oh, I just got hit with something really bad. I don't feel good on it. So then it went to him. Then it went to our next person, Keontae, for a little bit. Then it went to Becca.
I love visiting these ideas that we hear from time to time about what could be happening, specifically when it comes to when people describe seeing entities that present as black smoke or mist or haze or something. We've heard that a few times, but you don't hear that very often. I feel like this is my opportunity to ask JJ and Alex, like, what's going on with that? Like, why would an entity, demonic or otherwise, present itself in the form of a smoky apparition as opposed to something else, like, a hazy figure or a black mass or something? Like, what about the smoke? Does that pop out any ideas in your heads what that means? Is it just preference for the entity, or like what's going on there?
Depending on the entity is how they may present themselves, and depending on how they want to manifest. For me specifically, I mean, depending on their desire, are they trying to scare you? Do they want, like, what do they want? If that thing was trying to scare me or whatever, I'm an investigator. I do all this stuff for a living. So obviously, a figure in front of me, I'm just going to whip out my camera. That's not going to scare me. Trying to make me feel as if I'm losing control or anything like that. It was trying to stir me up. I think that's exactly why it was manifesting in that way. For example, if it were something more animalistic, you might be seeing crawling or animalistic black mass, and you might be getting bite marks or scratches or something more along the lines of like a brute energy type of thing. It would really depend on the entity, and it felt really old and ancient there. So it was really wise. It was very strategic.
The only thing that I could add to that is if there is such a thing as a conservation of energy, then it definitely takes less energy to be less distinct than it would be for something to be much more clear. Could have something to do with it, but again, we're dealing with a realm in which we do not have the rule books for, so everything that I could come up with would simply be a nice little guess, and I think that can leave it at that.
Yeah, because like the best way that I could even go into that is like inhuman spirits do not need electricity to manifest. So it doesn't take much for them to want to manifest. If they want to manifest, they're gonna do it however they please. It all has to do, in my opinion, it has to do with the type of entity, its origin, its desires, and the strategy. They're very intellectual when it comes to that and how they want to prey on people, or if that's what they want to do. Do they want to feed? Do they want to possess? Do they want to kill? Do they want, there's such different levels to that.
I like the concept of the idea, like JJ was saying, that it takes, I know you said that this isn't a certain thing, but I do think that there's something to that when you were saying an entity in that form that doesn't have actual distinguishable form, if it comes in the, and if it presents itself as like a gas or a smoke or something, it might take less energy or effort to do so. That's kind of an interesting concept. Like, I do wonder if there's something to that where you could say, well, if it presents itself like that, maybe it's not sure how it wants to come about in this realm, how it wants to present itself, or maybe it just can't. Like maybe it just doesn't have the capability to manifest how it wants to. So maybe there is such a thing as like a weaker entity in that moment that presents itself in that way.
Oh yeah, because there's hierarchies, and there's, different levels and different entities. There's offspring, and some of them literally only have certain roles and certain dominions until they find a loophole or that. So that could very well be what JJ was saying. Maybe that was his easiest way possibly to manifest unless I were to give it that invitation or a loophole or whatever to go on. That's very likely too.
Yeah, and I mean, even within, say, Catholic theology, you have Father Martin who states very clearly in one of the stories, I think it's the Rooster and the Tortoise, that there are different levels of entities. It's almost like reading the screw tape letters to an effect where you have the younger entity that is reporting to the higher one, but there are definitely gateway entities that are there to tempt, but they don't have nearly as much influence or power as their hires, I guess you could say.
Yeah, exactly. And you were talking about Malachi Martin, right?
Yep,
I like him.
I do too. That book changed my life.
Yeah. I have one by him I'm looking to open. I actually have it sitting in my room at home. I'm like, oh, I'm going to open that soon.
Yeah, I first read that in college, and beyond the horrible nightmares it gave me for 6 months straight after reading it, yeah, I almost became a priest after that. So, yeah, you could say it had a bit of a influence.
Yeah. Yeah. A lot of people say they have like experiences opening that book and reading it and such.
Yeah, Hostage to the Devil is one of my favorite books. I love the audiobook. You mentioned the word entities multiple times.
Mhm.
Are you able, with your abilities, to distinguish what entity is what, do you actually see them, or do you just kind of feel the energy?
It depends. I've seen them, I have felt them, I've heard them. When there is an issue here, it did show itself to me. And that was the first time I had seen an entity, and that scared me so bad. While I was in training for mediumship professionally, I stopped doing readings for a hot minute. I was terrified. I was terrified. And then to get it out of my head, I painted it and I drew it. And now every time I see an entity in any of my residential cases, I draw them and paint them and release them. And then I put it in a folder and I shut that shit down.
I have to ask, you knew this question was coming. What do they look like?
Different to each person or depending on how they want, but not pretty, really gruesome. Not like if you could think of what something ugly looks like, they're ugly. They're terrifying. A friend of mine, George Lopez, he actually runs Dead Air. He's friends with Andrea Perrin. Both him and I have taken cases where we've both seen the same entity and it looks like a hooded figure and it's just got, I've seen its red glowing eyes before, but it's just got this unusually big smile of like pointy teeth. And it seems like something that isn't realistic. It's like, oh, that's something a kid would draw. But then if when you see these things in person, it's like jolting. It's like one of those things where it's like you could tell people that psychic mediums and UFOs are real and on the CIA documents, and they're like, no way. And then they freak out when they see it. It's just one of those things where you can't prepare yourself until, like, there's nothing you can do to prepare yourself to see anything like that.
I could only imagine what that would even be like. I mean, I guess going into an investigation, you kind of mentally prepare yourself, like, I might see some shit. But just out of curiosity, you're ever like walking down the street, it's like, fuck, I'm gonna go into like the grocery store, or you just go into like some sort of shop and you just like out of the corner of your eye see things and it's like, okay, well, I just gotta ignore it now? Or has that ever happened to you?
Yeah, there's places I go where I'm like, oh, I sense something here. Or there's definitely times like that, especially like with the history over here and everything. There's a lot of like old buildings and like a lot of like war history and Native American history over here and such, like War of 1812 and
Mhm.
burning of Buffalo and all that good stuff. So, oh man, I'll never forget the one time I literally biked up to a family video. I don't even think the place is there anymore. And I walked in, and as soon as I walked in, movies flung off the shelves in front of me, like really dramatically. So I went up to the counter. I was like, does this happen a lot? And they were like, yeah, actually, it scares people out of here. It's really haunted here. That was before I had business cards. That's before I was doing this professionally or anything. So I didn't even know what to tell them. But I was like, yeah, there's some stuff going on here. There's something. Like somebody is definitely here. So yeah, there's times where it's not necessarily negative, and then there's times it is negative. But
The other question I have for you, you said you've heard entities before. Now, taking what you've seen and what you've heard and your artistic interpretation of them, how accurate are these people that make horror movies or like portray sounds of these entities like the demonic? Is it similar, or is it close, or are they like way fucking off and like you guys have no idea what this really sounds like?
some of them are similar. Some of them are, yeah, visionary and with sound. Some of them are, yeah, I would say. Some of them sound really dark and low, and some of them have a very high pitch, like almost falsetto. Like you wouldn't necessarily think that some of them sound like that.
Like, holy
But
shit, this one sounds like Mickey Mouse. Like, what?
yeah, like something like really off and high pitched and almost staticky and like if you've heard it through an EVP or a spirit box, it'll sound like
Mhm.
really high pitched, staticky, or you'll get those like deep growls, or I've gotten hissing, I've gotten like animalistic sounds before that I don't even know how to describe. Like how like when a cat is about to like prey on something, they'll like do that clicking sound almost.
Yep.
I've heard that before from an entity.
See, I don't know how you hear that stuff and see that stuff and just continue to do what you do. That's
Have a really good faith. Have a really, really good faith.
But Alex, the last time we spoke, you've done quite a few readings for folks. You've investigated quite a few places. You mind sharing some of the locations you've investigated and maybe some of the creepy things you encountered?
I want to say the one place that I really stands out to me. I, since talking to you guys, investigated the Greystone Manor a couple times. And when I first went there, it was really interesting because I wanted to cry. I felt really emotional in not a bad way. I was like, I feel like I'm related to the people that built this house. I had my other investigator at the time. He was like, you've got to be nuts. Like, you've got to be going cuckoo. I'm like, yeah, maybe. After that first investigation, I went home. I was on DNA, Ancestry.com and all that. And it turns out I was directly related to the people that built that mansion. My phone completely shut down when I got that notification too. I had to restart my phone, wait for it to turn back on, contact the owner. Turns out I am related to the owner of the Greystone Manor. She found out she's related. So the next time we had visited, I remember trying to sleep that night. And I was like, oh, there's so much energy in this room. I don't feel like I could sleep right now. And I hear creaking and I look over and the closet door is just creaking open and then it creaks shut slowly. And there's carpet on the ground that this door gets caught on. It was built in 1833 or something like that. Like that door doesn't open by itself. Like you have to pull it open because of the carpet. That was pretty wild because I felt like there was a little kid right there. And I'm not gonna lie, I deal with entities and all that, but little kid spirits really do creep me out for some reason. Like actual little kid spirits. And it freaked me out really bad because there was just a kid behind the door, you know what I mean? I remember walking through the halls too, and I started talking to my ancestors, and technically it would be a great cousin. The REM part started going off like crazy. REM pot, all of our equipment that was actually posted too, but there's some evidence that was not posted yet, and I'm not sure if it will get. Hopefully it does, but we had major activity at this Greystone Manor. It's in Gasport, New York, for anybody that ever wanted to go. There is an entity there as well that is really creepy actually, that will set stuff off. People have been dragged before. I actually at one point while I was sleeping there, I felt like my foot get pulled out of bed, but I was so tired that I didn't do anything. So I literally felt my foot get pulled down the bed. So there was quite a few circumstances like that. I want to say the most prominent thing that happened, I know I felt something in the one library room, so I was like, let's set up a camera. We're going to go investigate outside. Within the time frame that we went outside, that camera caught this cat getting picked up by something. I posted it on my TikTok. I should have sent it to you guys to show it. Literally, this cat's getting lifted up, and you can tell the cat's sleeping, and it gets freaked out and jumps down out of midair. But the way the cat moves and everything, you can tell someone's picking this cat up.
If I saw that, I would not go back. No, I'll send someone else to get my shit, and I'm not staying there. I'm not investigating.
I'm more terrified of a spider on the wall than the cat getting lifted up. I'm like, what do I do about this spider? Shoot.
There was a horror movie. I have no idea. I can't remember what it was called. It was kind of like a B horror movie, but the whole premise was these ants kept, I think it was ants or maybe it was flies, I can't remember. It was kept infesting this guy's house more and more, and it turned out, spoiler alert, it's I don't even remember the name of the movie, so I can't spoil it. It turns out that it was a biblical demonic entity that controlled the flies or ants. Isn't there's some kind of biblical demon that is associated with ants?
Not ants, but there is one for flies. Baalzebub.
Flies.
There's a fantastic short story that I read growing up, and it was all about a gentleman who constantly had flies around him and did everything that they could to try to purge the insects from his presence, never could. And finally, one of his friends, who was a scientist, captured one and realized that these are not flies. It was a fantastic story. But yeah, Baalzebub, Lord of the Fly.
Did he try taking a shower?
Yeah, he did everything.
I can't. I'm sorry. I couldn't help it.
Chris was like, did we debunk the fly problem?
That'd be the first. If someone came to me dude, I got all these flies, they're just following me everywhere. It's dude, did you try taking a shower?
A, B, and C, yeah.
Yeah, let's rule all this shit out before we think it's Beelzebub. The cat floating, that would have been my thing. no. No. I would have been like, screw it. I'm not going back in there. Someone else could go get all that stuff. Get the equipment. I'm not going back in there. Get the cat too. Get that
I
poor thing out.
actually, I think I was the one that went and got the equipment. The cat, when we came back, we didn't even know that had happened until we looked over the footage. But the cat, by the time we came back in, was already laying with the other cats on a different couch in a different room, acted like nothing had happened. So thankfully, cat, nothing was wrong with the cat. Cat was unharmed and everything. But like, yeah, I think we like had to look over and we were like, wait, did that cat get picked up? And then like, yeah, just went in and I remember sitting in there and getting like, it feels uncomfortable in that's the only room that had a TV in that whole manor too.
Oh, wow. So people actually still live there.
The owner will stay there and rent out the other rooms. You can rent the whole place to investigate, or you can just rent a room out and investigate whatever's not being used in the house. And the land has an old settlement in the back. I mean, like, it is very historic, very haunted there. I mean, like, literally you end up wanting to stay up all night long just investigating and everything. So yeah, the owner will stay there, and then the next morning she'll like give you options of breakfast you want and everything. It's like a B&B, so it's really cool.
Well, that's pretty neat. That's always nice. Scare
Yeah.
the shit out of you, but what would you like for breakfast, sir?
Yeah, actually you do scare each other. There are times you literally scare each other because you're expecting it to be a ghost or it's not, and then it's like, oh crap, that's a real person.
Yeah.
Like, yeah.
Rather it be a real person. Another question I have for you, Alex. Not only do you investigate these locations, you said you actually investigate residences. Like people contact you to come to their homes and investigate as well. If you could think back to some of the homes that you've visited within the past year with people contacting you, what have they contacted you about? Were there any instances where you walk into a home and you were like, I'm sorry, I can't help you?
I've not had that happen yet, shockingly. There have been cases that have popped back up where I need to revisit them. I want to say one of them, one person contacted me. She had other people investigate there, and she just hadn't really gotten all the answers she was quite looking for. She didn't want a cleansing. She just wanted to know what was going on in her home because it became so active that it got on a radio broadcast like WIRK or something like that. I mean, like, she would go into her kitchen. There's only one way to get into her kitchen, and there would be bowls stacked in the middle of the room on top of each other. Wild activity. Seeing little kids run around her house, full on apparitions, things moving on their own in front of you, like just like crazy stuff. Hearing voices, So it just got to a point where she had tagged me. Her dog would even be barking and like acting like somebody was home. Her kids were like really afraid of like this tall shadow figure or this tall man. The tall man is what they would call him, her kids. Before I do any digging, I'll do like a psychic walkthrough, whether I can physically get there or whether I help them remotely. I'll do a reading on the place and then I'll do history and compare and contrast a little bit and see what I get. Because usually I think that fills in the blanks, you know what I mean? Did a reading on the place. I can't remember quite what I picked up, but I kept picking up that there was a very prominent woman that used to teach there and da-da-da-da-da. I dive into the history and it turns out that her home was an old school, like academy. The first woman that ever ran for presidency taught at that academy. Her home was really haunted with a lot of residual energy. I found out that, there was an old principal there that could have been a little bit bitter and more strict. So I think that might have been even the tall man that was kind of just lurking and like trying to watch to make sure everyone was doing everything they should have been. Even during the residential case, I remember saying something that made sense with like German soldiers or something, and I didn't even know what the word meant. I think I said Hamlin or Hamlet or something. I didn't even know there was a Hamlin or Hamlet right next to the town that we were in. And I kept picking up soldiers and German soldier, and there was a lot of history from the land, let alone the actual building too. So
if you don't mind sharing, when you went to that location, after you did your psychic walkthrough, did you do anything for them? Kind of rid the spirits, or what did they want out of you specifically?
So that specific case, they actually asked me not to cleanse. She actually has abilities. Her kids are pretty okay with it. They weren't bothered, but they just wanted to know what was going on. So I ended up being able to dig a lot of history on their land. I don't know. I think girls just are really good investigators. I don't know. So I was able to dig up all this stuff on Google and find all this stuff on her land. Along with like the reading I did, I was able to find out that some of the activity in that home is actually her grandfather. I picked up her grandfather right off the bat, described him, felt his energy come in. The REM pod started going off like crazy when we were talking about him. And then once he like kind of walked away, stuff went pretty quiet until we were interacting with other spirits there, and they just wanted answers. They didn't so much want a cleansing in this case. That case, they wanted answers. Most times I provide a cleansing, answers, whatever is needed, especially if you're allowing me to investigate your home. Obviously now that I don't have a team and doing it solo, I have to be a little bit more careful going to people's homes. I don't know how to edit. I don't have a camera. I just have my phone, my equipment, and myself. Kind of navigating doing residential cases again by myself, but I definitely am still getting them and everything coming in.
So in the cases where you had to do a cleanse, what was your methodology?
Prior to doing a cleansing, I usually make sure that I'm mentally in a good state of mind myself, good night's sleep, mentally, emotionally. I'm making sure that I'm good. I will meditate and cleanse a lot myself. Now what I do for cleansing and everything, there's a long list in that. I kind of go through X, Y, and Z to prepare meditation, cleanse, grounding, protecting, all that wording as well. And then going into the cleanse and everything, I usually will start from the bottom up. That's how I was taught to always go from the bottom up. Going into that, I kind of have to gauge if it's a more basic cleansing or if I'm kind of going in with a little bit more force, because some people are just it depends on what kind of cleansing. Some people are like, it just feels like stagnant, it feels icky in here, I just want to cleanse. Or some people are like, I'm experiencing activity and I need to rid. So that would also depend on what I'm doing, because there's times where I'll do a light cleanse or I'll do a more deep cleanse where I'm getting each four corners of the room with oil as well, where I'm doing the four corners of the property afterwards as well to like seal everything off. So there are a lot of strategy with like depending on herbs, depending on waters, depending on oils. I also do light language, obviously the shamanism. I'll call in spirit guides, archangels, Pachamama, stuff like that to kind of go through and help me rid the energy. So basically what you want to do is when you're cleansing and getting rid of energy, you need to invoke something to fill that space. So I'll invoke it with good energy.
Have you ever had instances where you did a cleanse and it's like, okay, I think this worked, and like a couple weeks later you get a call back and it's like, hey, what do you do after that point where it's like, okay, do I have to do this again? Or were there instances where it's like, okay, I did a cleanse, I can't help you, you got to go talk to a priest or something?
There are times where I have been called back to a place and I did my cleansing, things were good, and then they were getting doors slamming and stuff the next day. So I went back there and I just kind of vibed out again, kind of did the psychic walkthrough. And I was getting that this man just didn't want to go. He was pissed off. He was angry. This is his house. It was his mom's house. Ended up needing to cross him over and then cleanse the home. He was kind of hiding a little bit more, I think. So after that point, they haven't had any activity since then. They actually were so grateful. They made me a little cup and a t-shirt with their cricket machine or whatnot. But then, there are cases where the home's so haunted. There's more work I could do on it, and I actually even was trying to involve another shaman that's more known in the area on the case if she wants it resolved. But she ended up taking it and saying, the activity is so extreme here, it's so historical, and it's the land, it's not the house. She ended up wanting to take her and turn it into a haunted location. Something where the activity was so extreme, she actually wanted to appreciate the history of it, but there's portals and things there as well. So with that, I would have had to call on more help. So for an exorcist or shaman, to take on exorcism. You know, there's such things as like a local exorcism that would be done on a home, and then there's major that would be done on people. So for that, it would be more done on a home, but there would need to be energetic work done to close those portals. It would take a lot, and I would probably need a little help because in numbers, you have more power with that stuff. So that's where I was at with that, where I was like, okay, we can either call in more help, or do you want to keep this as a historic location? And she chose to keep it as a historic location, and Nick Groff is hoping to get in there eventually. Fingers crossed.
That would be pretty interesting. He has his own show and everything too, right? So
Yeah, he wants to film there for Deathwalker. It just kind of depends on when she can open it back up because she's had to be staying there for a while. She recently had a baby, so she's had to stay there until she gets into a different home, and then she can rent it out again.
now that you're investigating solo, or even when you were investigating with a group, that you like feared for your safety, or potentially you feared for your life with these entities that you encounter.
There has been times where I was like, okay, enough is enough. There definitely has been times. I want to say there's been a couple haunted roads in this area that we had to call it because it just started to get a little too intense, a little too negative. Shane, a lot of times, he had a lot of fun with certain provocation, I want to say. But I think there was even a point where he got freaked out and he was like, you know what? Maybe we should go. Pigman's Road, when we met, was probably one of them. There was a lot of provocation happening. Like at one point, Shane was like, oh, hey, what's up? It's me, your boy Shane. Like, come get me, demons. And he was getting scratches. He got like attacked really badly.
Now that we're kind of came full circle with back to like, cleansings and exorcisms, I do have a question for you, Alex, about that, because we have my good buddy JJ here. We've talked at length about exorcisms. We talked about Father Malachi Martin, and from the perspective of like, the Catholic rite of exorcism. And then they're obviously through different beliefs and different religious structures, they have their own forms of exorcism. When it comes to exorcisms, do you guys think that there is some overlap, or is it like, exclusive to, okay, only a Christian priest like a Catholic priest can do this? Or
for me personally, I do feel that like you need to do what you're called to do, whatever your religious background would call you to do. And exorcism being in every religious background, I don't feel that there's any one that's better than the other, but it depends on the person needing help or the home needing help, and what energy is surrounding that. Is that family Christian? Are they Catholic? Are they more like whatever they may be? I've actually talked to shamans that do exorcism with people that are Catholic. So I don't see that there's any like one better, or I think it just depends on the situation, on what's needed.
I would
See that?
agree with that. I would say the only commonality, no matter what type of rite is used, is you never can use your own individual power to do an exorcism. That is the path to the infernal. Absolutely.
That's what really fascinates me about this whole world and these concepts of trying to fight off evil entities, whether they're demonic or not. It's like you can translate these experiences and actually list them and describe them across cultures and religions. I just can't get over the fact like that you can talk about one perspective and say like the Roman Catholic Church when they're focusing on an exorcism or something, but then you can jump 10,000 or like 5,000 miles away somewhere else to some other religion or belief structure, and they're going through something similar that could be described similarly, but they're making sense of it through a different lens, and they're approaching a solution through a different lens. And like I just feel like there's so much that you can creatively unpack in those moments or discussions and experience. That's why I love touching on this stuff with you guys, because we inevitably always get back to that point of a broader discussion of like what's really going on for humankind, like in human experience.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I agree with what JJ was saying too. I mean, I do believe that if you do exorcism, shaman, priest, bishop, whatever, there is a rite of exorcism that you have, but you do have to be calling on higher powers because no man is more powerful than an entity or whatnot. And the fact, if more people could come together and talk about this stuff in the different forms and there could be a lot more help at stake for a lot more people.
That's why we have this show, right? For people to talk about it, put it on the proverbial airwaves on your podcast app, for people to get some sort of understanding and exposure to how these things work. Because for you, Alex, you actually do this stuff. You do cleansings, you do readings. So it's not like you're just pulling it out of thin air. This is all based off of your experience, which is why I love having guests on the show, because I don't think you can really grasp it unless you talk to someone, that is actually out doing things. Do I wish we could talk to Father Martin? Yeah, absolutely. Am I going to try to fucking use a Ouija board to do that? Absolutely not. So
I might have a friend that helped with Malachi at one point. You guys should reach out to Jimmy Pedinino.
Jimmy Pedinino.
He's a friend of mine. Yeah, he's helped Ed Lorraine. He's helped quite a few people. He's been involved in exorcism. He'd probably be a really cool dude to have on for you.
Oh wow, yeah. I'll have to do that. I'll message you after the show and try to get some contact information for him. That'd be awesome to talk to someone that actually worked together with Father Martin and the Warrens. It's really fascinating.
Yeah.
But before we wrap up the show today, guys, and again, Alex, thank you for your time. JJ, early on in the show, before we transition to Alex talking about some of her investigations and those experiences, you did have a question that you wanted to.
Yeah, I do, because I really wanted to ask about your medium experience in the terms of this. So I was on as a guest of another show, and I'm not going to drop names because I'm not trying to cast incriminations, or it could be my own narrow-mindedness that is on stage. And if it's mine, then I'm willing to take it. That's not a problem in the world. But one of the people involved also claimed to be a medium and a psychic, and claimed that I had a absolutely horrible Japanese spirit that was just haunting me, and then recited some nonsense in Japanese and said, "Okay, you are now clean," and acted like it just drained all the energy from her. I I thought it was complete BS, but I would love to get someone who is one of these, because I'm not I'm as sensitive as a dormouse might be, but someone who has experience, to get what your take on that may have actually been.
So they could have been speaking. I'm not sure. You said they spoke Japanese, or
Yes, they claimed it was a Japanese spirit and it had been haunting me for years, and then just within a 2-minute process cast it out.
it could have been possible, because I do a lot of energy work and shamanism. I mean, I can speak light language and I've cleared, but the difference is you'll feel the effect. You'll feel a lift. You would feel something lighter. However, if you're resistance, or if you felt like, I feel wishy-washy about them, there would have been a resistance if there was. I personally, I don't know that I feel a Japanese entity attached to you by any means or anything like that, but I will say that they might have been doing some type of energy work, but you might not have been susceptible to it, depending. They gave a vibe that you felt like you couldn't trust them, you're not going to be susceptible. You know how they say if you have a really strong mind, you can't be under hypnosis, you know what I mean? If you felt strongly about the energy of that person and didn't feel you could trust them, or didn't feel like, you might have been resistant or just not susceptible to them doing energy work on you to rid.
Gotcha. Okay, thank
Or
you for
there's
that.
a possible that they are wishy-washy. There's a possibility that they were wishy-washy, because that happens too. I hate to say that, but there are so many people that claim to be this, that, and the third. So
I greatly appreciate that. Thank you. And again, I'm not trying to cast aspersions on anybody. It's just I like to gather opinions from others, because if you're not a subject matter expert, then it's best to talk to subject matter experts. So.
yeah, definitely. No, yeah.
Actually, it's funny. I was actually on a hypnotist stage at one point, Did I ever
Really?
tell you that?
Really?
Did you
No,
did you cluck like
no.
a chicken?
No,
You still believe
so-
you're a chicken?
So no, I don't. Thank God. And I used to raise chickens. That would have been really confusing. No, So it was during a comedy show, and there was a comedic hypnotist that was there, and he called for volunteers. And I was really curious because I've heard a lot of interesting things about hypnotism. I have an open mind on the topic, so I went, sure, I'll go up on stage. And I during the process, I kind of felt like I was about to go under, but just something held me back, and I snapped out of it really quick. So I went and sat back down. They brought someone else to replace me because I wasn't going to sit there and try to pretend to do all this stupid stuff. But yeah, I've never been hypnotized as a result. So not saying it
Dude, I
can
feel the
happen.
same way. I feel the same way. Like I've never done that myself, but I've often put myself in an imaginary situation where I would, someone try to hypnotize me, and like I'm not trying to sound like male bravado or anything, but I really don't think it would work on me because I'm just like too, for lack of a better term, like anxious and ultra aware and tied into everything at any given moment. That's just how I've been from a young age. So I do wonder, like, I'm like you, JJ, like maybe there is a way for me to get hypnotized, but I think that most of the time I just would not be able to like get into that mind state or let myself get into that mind state.
I think you're like me. I have like 15 filters constantly running between
Yeah.
my brain and the outside world.
Check
Same
And
here.
I can't let them go. I really can't.
Yeah.
It's impossible. And if I did, then I would be very frightful for those who would then interact with me.
This is going to be really heavy to say. I think about this too sometimes. Like people like us, when eventually we do have to go, I think it's people like us is going to have the hardest time to go because like we want to like stay tied into awareness and consciousness so hard that it would either take like a big wham shutting us off, or like if it was like a slow drift, like I can't even imagine what someone like that would be going through, like having ultra awareness and stuff like that. Maybe that's kind of like a discussion for later for like, energies and consciousness and all that stuff. But I thought about that recently.
Speak for
Well,
yourself. I fucking hate this place.
Well, there's
You
the,
just want to be gone. It's like,
I can honestly say people like us that are hyper aware, vigilant, and very conscious and mindful, they tend to be people that when we pass away, the transition between life and death, we tend to be able to communicate a lot easier to our loved ones on the other side then because we're so conscious and you pick up, after we pass, we don't have we're 3D right now, so we don't have our voice box, and learning communication again is all energetic. And so that can be a minute for people to pick up. But for people that are more conscious like us, that stuff's going to pick up easy. You'd be able to communicate to your loved ones from that other dimension fairly easy then, probably.
I have been so heavily influenced by Shintoism and Nichiren Buddhism that I'm a Catholic, but I still heavily involved with these theories. And there's this idea within Japanese society that when you pass away, you have to be absolutely peaceful. You have to be open for it and ready for it. And any kind of dark smudge that comes across your conscious or your mind at that time can lead to some pretty horrible outcomes. I think if I was in that boat, I would try to get into that peaceful state of mind. I'm not sure
Yeah.
if I would achieve it, but I would
Yeah.
certainly try.
yeah, operative word, try. I'm the same way, man.
But Alex, I know we've had you here for close to an hour, and I want to be respectful of your time. Thank you again for coming on the show. Please tell our listeners where they could find you if they want to get into contact with you for a reading or any type of cleansing or help.
So they can find my social medias all on alexgaska.com. They can find me on TikTok under Alex Marie Gaska. They can find my Facebook under the same name. You can find me on YouTube under Alex Gaska. You just type me up. You just got to make sure it's my real account and not like all the fake ones. There's a lot of that lately.
Oh, oh, I'm sure. Once you start getting big, like you'll get these con artists, making fake accounts. But again, you heard her, listeners. Go ahead, give her a follow, reach out to her if you're interested in readings or cleansings or anything of that sort. Again, Alex, thank you for being a great guest on the show. We would love to have you back on again. And listeners, I hope you enjoyed today's episode. Thanks for tuning into today's episode of The Wandering Road. You can find us on Apple, Google, Spotify, and most podcast platforms. Be sure to subscribe and share. Also, don't forget to give a follow on Instagram at twroadpodcast and follow my TikTok at twrpodcast. Take care, and I'll catch you on the next one.